Hello, Diaspora family. Welcome back to our mini series where we're exploring the current challenging environment around immigration policies across several countries in the global north and how that is impacting on our families. In the last episode, we talked about living in the shadow of these policy changes across countries such as the US, the United Kingdom, Canada, the enforcement, stereotypes that arise from this that are very real, and the fear that this causes for our families. Today we're staying with that theme of fear, but we're going to step deeper to explore this in a different context. This episode is about why we need to name and speak what we are experiencing in this moment. What happens when fear goes unspoken? What lives in the room when we do not name fear? Because you see, a lot of the time when we experience fear, we don't talk about it. And for a lot of us culturally, we're used to keeping things inside to ourselves. But just because we don't speak a thing doesn't mean it does not exist. Now, a lot of us come from cultures where we do not often talk about what we fear. We keep it in, we contain it, and we just plod on. Oftentimes, we are also concerned about what our children will feel if we tell them about the things that they're experiencing. Some parents have told me, I don't want to scare my child. I don't want to burden them with the reality and the truth of what's happening. My child is too young to understand. How do I speak to them about these deep matters? And that instinct comes from love. However, just because we don't talk about fear or we don't talk to our children about it doesn't mean that fear disappears. Both from research and lived experience, we understand that one of the really important things is that children sense fear even when we don't name it. They feel it in different ways. So for instance, you're having a conversation and you stop. Or the news comes on and you switch it off. They experience it in how we tense up when we are around certain authority figures, perhaps a police car driving past. They sense it when they ask a question and we respond very quickly or we avoid it altogether. They may not understand what's happening, but our silence in these instances or our avoidance doesn't protect our children from the fear in this current environment. Often it actually just leaves them alone with it, wondering, and sometimes imagination can be worse than reality. So, Diaspora family, let's explore this. What are the things that we are afraid of in this moment? Let's name some of them. What fear are you carrying as a parent? And what fear do you think your child will be carrying in this moment? At the top of the list, or one of the really important ones, will be fear of family separation. That depends, of course, on your kind of family. Some people mix in mixed legal status households. Some people are in a situation where they are working to have family reunification. So are we going to actually have that reunification? Are we going to be separated? For people who may be in a situation where their status may not be quite what it needs to be, there may be the fear of being detained. However, even for those with legal status, because of a lot of what's been happening across the board, we see that there are people who have legal status, who are arrested, who are detained, who are questioned because of how they look, how they sound. So for even people with legal status, they will be wondering, could I potentially be arrested? Could I be questioned despite having legal status? There is also fear in that context whether our children could be targeted in a public space, in school for instance, or some other areas where they are in. What will people be telling them? What will they talk to them about? How will they address them? I know that a lot of groundswell of emotion around the 5-year-old who was detained by ICE in the United States. And you wonder, could that perhaps happen to my child? There is also the fear about how our difference can lead to us being set apart, otherized, not belonging. Perhaps because of accent, skin color, our names, all of these things that make us visible in ways that the majority or those who are in authority, those who are enforcing, could treat us differently. For people who currently have legal status but temporary and working towards permanent status, there is the fear of instability, that the safety that you currently have may be revoked. And what will that mean? We explored some of this last episode around the investment that has gone into making the journey that we are all on. We could name quite a number of other specific fears, but a big umbrella issue that permeates all of this is the future. The reason why a number of us make this journey, our children. What kind of future can I promise my child if everything feels so uncertain? Will they be safe? Can I give them the dreams and the ambitions that I have for them? And when we feel all of this, as we said previously, our children also sense it. And they may not verbalize this, but the fear in our children shows up in different ways. I mean, we know it, we're parents. We know how their reactions demonstrates what they're feeling. But remember, last week we talked about toxic stress. And that means that depending on the age of your child, there could be a lot of different ways in which this fear may be manifesting even today. Because when children don't have words for what they are sensing, their bodies will have to demonstrate that fear in different ways. So for instance, you might notice in maybe slightly younger children, more tantrums or irritability. For some children, there may be a bit of regression, for children who previously were a bit more independent, becoming more clingy. For some children, it may be bedwetting. For some children, it may be regressing in how they speak, not talking clearly, reverting to baby talk. Some children may have sleep problems. They may have nightmares or not being able to sleep and come, in the night come to you because they want to cuddle. They want to be comforted. Some children, again, depending on age, may not want to be separated from parents because they are concerned whether they will come back home and see their parents. Fear of being separated. So they may not want to go to school. Or perhaps how they're treated in school, or how somebody may make them feel in school, or what is taught may make them feel. And so they may not want to go to school. And oftentimes they ask questions. When are you coming back, for instance? Is it going to be okay? Daddy, are we safe? Mommy, are we going to be able to achieve the things we said we were going to do? Now, why it is important to understand this is sometimes when our children exhibit these behavior changes, especially because we are also in that mode of being stressed about everything else, we can get frustrated with them. And we can think that they are just having, they're just playing up, or they're just having behavioral problems. But please do watch your children and see whether that is the case, because a lot of these sorts of behavior psychologists have said are children's ways of communicating. So they're communicating to you the stress that they carry in their body. Because remember again, we said last week that you feel in your body the stress. And therefore, children are asking in the only ways that they know how, whether the world around them is safe, whether they can trust what's been promised to them, whether they can trust the environment around them, whether they can go out and play in safety. So, why is it really, really important to name this fear? It is because that is what research tells us. that stresses on child development occur when we do not effectively engage with their fears. So what the research tells us is that naming emotions reduces the intensity of those emotions. They're no longer something, in the background that looms large. But if they stay in the background, if the feelings remain unnamed, they simply grow and become boogeymen. But when they are acknowledged, they become more manageable. Not disappear because they are real, but they become more manageable. And for children, this is especially true because their level of understanding of the wider context is limited. So without some clear direction and guidance, their fear gets exacerbated by what they imagine, some of which, as we earlier noted, may not even be reality. So, as parents, what can we do practically in this time? Why don't you take a minute just to pause and think and reflect? Because it always starts with you. What fear am I trying the hardest not to say out loud? Because the reality of it is overwhelming for me. Focus on that fear. It is real. Speak it, name it. And then once you've noted that fear, ask yourself, because it is real, you can't take away the reality of what it is. Practically, how might that fear be showing up in our home, in my child's life? All I'm asking you to do is look around you. See yourself. See your children. For now, you don't need to share that fear with your child. Just see it. This step is really just about honesty with yourself. Not hysterically, but just being honest. And remember, our children don't need to be fearless. They don't need to live without fear. They just need to be aware that they are not alone. So I've talked a lot about naming the fear. And I'm sure some of you are wondering, what does that mean? How do I name the fear? So let's talk a little bit about what naming the fear is and is not. Firstly, naming the fear, especially with our children, does not mean sharing adult worries in overwhelming detail, predicting the worst case scenarios. No. It doesn't mean that we transfer responsibility to our children, because sometimes it's easy. We need to talk. Again, especially if you don't have a wider village to work with, to talk with. Some of us may rely on our children to take on some of that responsibility for the fear because we offload to them. But that's not what we're talking about here. Because we cannot transfer that responsibility to our children. They are more fragile than we are. And that is why we need to protect them as we do. So what are some of the simple ways that we can capture what we're saying to our children? It could be as simple as, sometimes things in the world feel confusing. Grown-ups are talking about changes and they can feel scary. It's okay to feel worried, and I'm here with you. It could be as simple as that. So, in this week, we have delved a little bit further into the fear that is happening in the current period and how to begin to engage with our children about it. In the next episode, we'll move on to explore more how we talk with our children about fear in age-appropriate manners. Because the way in which you talk to your toddler will not be the way you talk to your teenager. What words to use, what words to avoid, how to respond when children ask questions that we don't have answers to. Thank you very much for spending this time with us today. I look forward to seeing you in episode 3.